in the building tonight, but yeah. I'm very pleased because it's a subject that I'm so passionate about. So I'm really touched that you're passionate enough to be here. Actually, it's completely improvised. I decided this morning to do a little lecture about that. Fortunately, I have some stuff from other lectures that will help me to have some visual material. I was just asking myself how to start, and usually we start in the very basic realm, and then we build up, and we try to have your mind, your rational mind, catching up and allowing it to happen, and then usually the final thing of this kind of lectures is really the deep part. But I don't know, for some reason we're going to do it the other way around tonight. So we just jump in directly. And I think, since I'm persuaded that we learn way more, that most knowledge that is here emanates from somewhere else. So if we can be in touch with something where there really is knowledge, then eventually this guy will pick it up. Because the brain for me is not a place to store knowledge, but it's more kind of VLAN to go into the web and to catch the knowledge which is around. So therefore, I'll ask you, we're going to start with a little meditation. I just decided 5 minutes ago, but I think it's going to help, because either you're able to feel it or not, you're going to be more in touch with what we're talking about. And so whether your rational mind does grab it or not, somewhere within you, the knowledge will be deepened. So I maybe shut down the lights a little bit, and you sit comfortably, close your eyes, and you just breathe deeply. And you don't want to breathe actively, you just want to watch your breath. So you watch how breath is coming in and out. And I want you to try to have a look where the breath is coming from. Is it you breathing? Or is it the breath coming and going? And maybe it's you just being lucky enough to catch a little bit of this breath going in and out. And while you watch this, I would ask you to more and more try to take some distance from this breathing, whatever, and from the breath itself. And try, like you would zoom back and go on zooming back and zooming back, really take a distance. Because actually the physical breath is it's not subtle at all. It's noisy, it's strong, it goes along with tension. And the more you zoom back, the more you might be in touch with something that is incredibly more still. And when you're far enough from is breathing something and from the breath, I would ask you to turn around your focus, your attention onto the stillness that is around. Because stillness is something that never disappears. We can put veils over it so that we do not perceive stillness, but actually it's the foundation and the basis of everything. And it's always there. So you can tune yourself into the stillness even though you're at a very crowded airport or whatever. And being focused on that stillness, I'll ask you to make up your mind whether this stillness is completely still or whether there is something. Whether there is still a force that is constant. And while you have your attention on that stillness, I'll ask you to come back nearer to your body, to your breath, to your physical reality, and come back into the room. And slowly at your pace, open your eyes again. So, what I'm talking about is not necessarily the osteopathy. It's neither, I don't know, a philosophy that you will find somewhere, but it's very personal. So, as everything is that you can learn about something which is not very concrete, very palpable. So actually when you read books, have lectures, whatever, it's anyway always a question of belief system and a question of the way to put a concept, to put a grid over something that we are not really able to grasp. So it's just my wordings and it's my reality, yet it's anyway based on maybe 30 years of meditation and pranayama and things like this, and then 20 years of working with patients. So there is a little bit of foundation to that, but yet it is my reality. So it's just meant as an inspiration. But what impresses me over and over and over again is that when we get in touch with something that feels maybe not like the truth, but nearer to the truth, most of the time we realize everything is completely different than what we thought. So the same is true for me for respiration, because I've learned in school that, and in my osteopathic training and so on, that inspiration is something active, expiration is passive. So I tense up my muscle, I pull air in, and then I just let it go. But once you sit quietly in a realm slightly beyond, you realize that inspiration is passive. Because there is a constant flow, and since you're in that game of life, you can get out of it if you want, but for the moment you're there. So as long as we're there, it's actually the breath that comes, takes us, and actively the breath actively penetrates the body, which passively is filled. And at some point, it would take the physical body into something that is so subtle that the bond is detached. And so the expiration is like you have this driving force coming into the body, and at one point the body withdraws from life. That's basically expiration. So it's active withdrawing from life that would breathe me. So that the inspiration is something that happens passive. And when we go back to other rhythms that are not, where we do not talk about the secondary respiratory mechanisms, so SRM, but where we talk something that is even beyond the PRM, the primary respiratory mechanism is what shapes the embryo before we have this thoracic inspiration. But behind this, we already have some motions. So you might have heard of long tide, mid tide, and the other, I don't know, it's the PRM actually. So the long tide is described as something, you might have felt it in some treatments where you have the impression that everything becomes extremely still and you have this kind of expansion coming. But it's described as something that has a cycle of 90 seconds, so 1.5 minutes, for inspiration and expiration. Yet when you're tuned into this force, I don't know, is it the life force? Because I'm not very at ease with osteopathic terms, since I'm not sure how they were really used. I think many of us use them differently. So that's why I have some troubles using them, because I'm not 100% sure. Do I use them exactly in the sense that Sutherland and Rollenbecker, Fulford, and so on, they used it? But to me, in this long tide, there is already what I would call a life force. You must not necessarily match the life force in osteopathy, but what I would call a life force, which is absolutely constant. It's something that just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So it's like the bow of a violin that is infinitely long. And this bow is just going. And life, at some point, touches it and is taken with it, inspiration, and then it becomes like too much and it falls down again. And it falls back, even though the bow is still going on. Because if you're tuned into this long tide, it's something that can go on forever. Or, if you choose to see it like this, it's something that goes and comes every 90 seconds. But to me, it feels exactly the same. It's just that I decided to watch at it this way, or I decided to watch at it this way. Either I decided to just follow the bow that is infinitely going on, or I decided to follow the little piece of what I am in the very beginning, that is following the bow, falling behind, and again getting into contact and having this friction. So life always goes along with friction. There is no life without friction, and everything happens out of that. So how is this bond created? I don't know. It's just an attraction of positive, negative that seems to be something universal. I don't know. But I know there is some physical matter that has some kind of opening at one point. So the cell, I don't know, is it the state where the cell is like, with a lot of sperms around? For those who know Jaap van der Walt, he calls this the the preconceptional attraction complex. So it's a complex that is attracting life, but it's preconceptional. It's before the sperm enters the cell. So I don't know, is it at this moment or is it the magical moment where you have like a blizzard going through because one sperm is going in and you have this depolarization of the cell, the membrane. But somewhere at this point, there is some kind of little opening where these more subtle forces can penetrate and create the very first tiny contact between a more subtle world and this physical entity. So what happens is that we see there the very first lemniscate, because lemniscates, you know, we call them lemniscates. Actually, a lemniscate mathematically is very clearly defined, and what we call the lemniscate in osteopathy is we're way more flexible with the term. But actually, it's something that very often is shown as a figure of 8. So at this moment, the very first lemniscate appears in the sense that something from the beyond gets into matter, is break down, curves, and goes back. And we actually have a lot of lemniscates. We find them a lot in the body. They are organized like fractals. So we have big ones that have smaller ones, that have smaller ones and smaller ones, and we can zoom in and out, and we're going to find lemniscates all over the place. You know about fractals? So we find a lot in the body that we can palpate and work with. But we also have a lot of lemniscates that are connecting the here and beyond. So one part is like diving into the cell and getting out again, but you have also one part that is diving in and is trapped in matter and stays there. And actually in the embryo, in the very first instances, the part that is in the embryo will especially create the trophoblast, so the part that later will be the placenta. But that's actually the first place for this being to live in. So it's like we are creating a little primitive or quite simple cocoon that is quickly done to live in, and from there create what we will call the embryo later. So that at birth, we can switch definitely from one into the other and let the old body die, the placenta. That's why a lot of ancient traditions did bury it into the earth, because actually if you have a place where your own placenta was buried, it's your own grave. And you can go there and it gives a totally other perspective to life if you can sit on your own grave of your ancient body. So, yeah, we have here the very first contact, and this force is then gonna start to shape the embryo from within. So it's like an origami that is fold and unfold innumerable times, but from within. And finally, we'll create these very complex structures with all that little cells and vessels and whatever. So, it is a very subtle force. Now, how can we link a very subtle force with this strong matter? It's actually not that easy. And there is a possibility of a link, but the link is very, in the beginning, as long as we're not really incarnated, it's a very weak link. And that's why when you look movies about ghosts, for example, what can they do, actually? I mean, in the very modern Hollywood movies, maybe they're gonna throw tables away and things like this, I don't know. But as far as I know, most of the time, the ghosts, they have an impact. They can shut your door, for example, by using the air. They can make the electricity fluctuating, or things like this. Or for example, if you have smoke, they can appear there, or appear maybe in the TV or whatever. That's the ideas we have about ghosts. But why is this? Simply because an organism which is not embodied in matter has only a minute possibility to act on matter, there where it's very malleable and where you don't need strong force. And actually, that's why. So we need something that is very subtle to take it and progressively bring it more and more into that matter. And one element that is very prone to do this job is water, because water is the most nothing matter, or the most material nothing that we have. And that's why every living organism, absolutely every living organism, starts with a huge amount of water. Some stay like this, other will slowly dry out, like we do, like most animals on Earth do. So with the time, we will be able to dry out and keep this connection. But in the very beginning, there is an incredible amount of water. And you know that aging process always, for every organism in the world, goes together with a reduction of the amount of water. So I want you to look at this little movie. I hope it works. So this guy is Chladni. He was the first one in the 19th century to play along with vibration and the patterns that vibration creates. So, but he did it with sand on a plate. You might have seen this kind of things. So, if you observe what this guy is doing, he's playing with his finger, he's moving the finger. For those who play string instruments, if you do a flageolet, it's like you do not really squeeze the string like you do on a guitar to play a note, but you just touch it a tiny little bit to have a vibration that would do this. If you touch it here in the middle, the string will be obliged to do this. And then you will have an octave. No, sorry, it's not a nice draw. It's good. Okay, I do it again. That would be the normal string, and if we do it half, it's going to be this. And if we do it at 1/3, it's going to be this. So we have different frequencies. That's actually what he's doing here. So he's changing the frequency with the finger. And then we will have other patterns. The fun thing about that is when you play around with these kind of things, you will find a lot of patterns that you find in life, in the whole creation, in all organisms. So later, Jenny in the 60s played around with electronic frequencies, so he could really go through all the frequencies. And again, you see that you have a lot of amazing patterns that we can find back in nature. And he found some frequencies where you have these patterns, but the sand is still moving, so they are not still. But that was only true for some of the frequencies. Just discovered it without any good explanation. And later, Alexander Leiterwasser did this kind of pictures that you might know. So it's just water and he's playing instruments, or he has very simple frequencies, and they create these patterns. And he starts here with infrasound. So there is a vibration in the plate, and look at this drop, how it changes. It's absolutely amazing. So you see the plate moving. And you see the shape that the drop slowly get into. So that's just a single drop with frequencies that are risen up. So that looks very organic, right? Yeah, that's just a comparison. And he actually made a lot. Yeah, what you do? So he made a lot of comparisons between the patterns he could have in water and different flowers and other shapes in nature. So if you look at this, you imagine there is some frequency that hits water and starts to create forms. And you think of this embryo, which is mainly water. Look at the skull, you can almost look through. So this is 99.9% water with a little bit of membrane around, or actually a lot of membranes, because internally there are lots of, which are all, at the moment we could already call them fascia. And you have vibrations in it, structuring and giving form to that water. And we also need to see that it is in water. The embryo itself is in water too. So you could not imagine creating something like this out of water. Simply because since he's swimming, resistance is almost zero. It's just the resistance of the fascial tissue, or just all the tissues that are there. It's metabolic flow that is creating that, but there is no outer resistance as we would have in gravity. Yeah, so we could talk a little bit about fascia, because we have a weird concept about fascia that comes also simply from history, from where we come from. Now, if you think in Canada and Pakistan, you know IKEA? Yeah? Okay. So if you would have to sell or to build me an IKEA human set, to build a human, how would you do that? What would be, I have my box, my IKEA box, what is the first thing that I take out and start to assemble? What would you suggest? Bones. Bones, yeah. That's what 99% of the persons would say. It's just because it's the way our mind has been built. So we would take bones, and then we would put all these bones together, putting the capsules and the ligaments on it, right? And then we would put the muscles on it, and maybe the organs, and then central nervous system, heart, and then comes the real pain in the ass story. We have to put all the wiring in and bring it through the muscles, and that would be a never-ending story. And if we are very going with our time, if we're modern, we would say yes, but we also have to add fascia. So we would take some kind of cellophane thing and put it around muscles, and then put it around muscle groups, and put it around the whole leg, and then we have everything wrapped in fascia. And then we would have a human. Now, my suggestion is, if we ask Steve Jobs or any design freak that he was able, but We still have people like this who are able to think beyond the box.
Some kind of fulcrum.
Hmm?
Start off with some kind of fulcrum.
Yeah, but the fulcrum is very abstract. So, but we're building a material body.
Yeah, but spirit has to somehow go through some sort of barrier to sort of start manifesting.
Yeah, but we're not there yet. I'm only with the fascia now, so I'm very basic.
Okay.
Yes, but of course fulcrums are really the key points for us to be in contact with this machine. But not being there yet, being still with the fascia, the other possibility would be that we take just the fascial body out of it. And this is just like a suit where everything is already integrated. You have all the chambers, and the rest of the box is just material to fill the chambers, right? So would we blow it up? We have already a human body like this, standing here, and being more or less stable. With, that would be the big advantage, all the wiring already put in, because it goes along fascia, right? So we just have to plug in the heart, plug in the brain and spinal cord, and the rest would be already integrated. So having this fascial body, which is still a little bit wobbly, then some of the compartments are made for really strong, like sticks, where we put the bones in it, or we could actually even just infuse bony material that would grow and then fill the whole space. And that's nearer to the way it's created. And then, of course, you have increased the stability. And then you can put in the single muscles and the organs and so on. And within that fascial system, of course, all the ligaments and capsules are already within, because it's not a different tissue. Periosteum is not a different tissue. Periosteum is just the fascia of the bone. And we are used to call fascia just the fascia of the muscle. But actually, the chamber where I would put the bone in is the periosteum chamber. But it's fascia, it's the same thing. So that's just another way to look at it, ending with the exact same result, but having like a different perspective. And if you have this view, it becomes also more obvious why a problem in my fascial system will distort everything. Why, what I was talking today about the elasticity of the fascia and the way we modulate the fascial system with the muscles. We are just modulating it. It gives another perspective on that. And it also gives another perspective on the activity of the water within that. Because what we need to understand is that the motion in the liquid is always first. So in the embryo, you might be aware of that. Here again, it's always the other way around. If, as an adult, I'm moving my elbow here, or I'm moving like this, I would say I move like this because I have an elbow, but in the embryo it's the other way around. It's because I have motion exactly here that I cannot do something different than to build an elbow there. That's what happens in the embryo. And what's also the other way around is the motion of liquid. We do not have movement in the blood because we have a heart that is pumping. It's not the way it works. Actually, we have 60,000 to 80,000 kilometers of capillaries. So one and a half or twice around the world, capillaries. They are so tiny that we have only 1 liter of blood in it. So imagine that. You take capillaries, you wrap them twice around the planet, you make them small enough to have only 1 liter of blood, and then you create a pump as big as this, and you tell me that this pump is able to bring the blood through all these capillaries. No. Liquid is moving. And actually the embryo shows it, because we create a heart because liquid is moving. It's not the other way around. You have some insulas of blood that you see they start to move. They start to move cranially. In the beginning, we built the heart here on top of the skull. And then we will roll in and bring the heart in between the upper and the lower pole, and then we will take the head out of it again. But in the beginning, I have no limbs yet. I have here contact with mom. That's where the blood comes from. And the hunger and the metabolism in my brain, which is growing and growing and growing, sucks the blood. And the blood starts to move. The motion of blood creates walls. So the blood vessels are built because the blood is already flowing. And the blood that is flowing cranially ends up in a dead end. And at one point, I will bring it down again. And then comes again, and I will bring it down again. So that's the way I build the heart. And then, of course, it's going to be very complex how it's wrapped and cycled and brought in. But it's the motion of the liquid that creates the heart, and not the other way around. And also, when you work osteopathically, with the time, you're really going to question that more and more. If it's really the pumping of the ventricle that moves your cerebrospinal fluid, because when it's completely blocked, you anyway have motion all over the fascias and the body. Same for the heart. So yeah, there are a few concepts that are questionable. So now let's put it slowly together, this liquid motion with the fascial system. You might have heard of this tensegrity model, which comes out of architecture. Once again, tensegrity just is a term built out of tension and integrity. And so we have here sticks, and we have here elastic bands, and this has these sticks, they are not in contact, but this holds in that form by itself, by the play between tension and the more structural structures. So the spine is built in a very similar way, and actually the whole body. That's new since we're talking about fascia. But still, for me, honestly, it's not enough. And I like this model way more because this is not three-dimensional. This is a volume, and that's a big difference. If you take just the tire here, the gum part, the inner part. If you take just the gum, you throw it on the floor, there is no form, there is nothing. If you take just the air, you have no form either. If you put the air into it, you start to have a form, and a form that sustains itself. So actually, if you get your fascial body with the liquid content in such a shape, you do not have to work your back muscles like hell to be straight. If you're walking around like this and people tell you, yeah, you have to work your back muscles, it's a possibility, but I'm very lazy, so I would prefer that it holds by itself. And when you're tuned in, when you have a good fascial integrity and you're tuned in something that really inspires you, automatically you will be like this. And you might have experienced it if you go to, I don't know, yoga class, meditation, whatever, and you went in like this because you were very tired, and you really have to carry your body with muscle strength, and then you come out and you're like, oh, I'm flying. Or for example, in dance or whatever, when you do something that really inspires you, suddenly, I'm very glad I don't have to carry with me a machine of 70 kilos. I would never want to carry with me 70 kilos. But this is nothing. This arm is not 40 kilos, 14. Actually, mine anyway not, because don't have enough flesh for it. But yeah, so we can make it a little bit more complex and go to this model. So yes, it's a little bit more complex in shape, but what is the difference here also is that we have this, I don't know how it's called, this blowing engine. So constantly air is blown in. And if something happens, for example, you have a tower that falls down, if you know, and that's actually what we do in osteopathy, if, for example, I have a torsion there, the air will not be able to pass and it will not be able to rebuild it. If I have troubles with the blower or the connection from the blower to the region where I had the injury, that's not going to work either. But in osteopathy, if this is working, this is free, and this has a minimal integrity, even though it may be in this form, yet you let your patient go and you tell him in 3 days you're gonna be fine. Because here, if my job is to look after this castle, if I've done this job, I go to drink a coffee and I know if I come back in half an hour, the castle will be upright. And it's actually what we can use in osteopathy. If all the mechanisms are working, the life itself will bring it back into its shape. Actually, I'm losing track now because I followed the PowerPoint and the PowerPoint was absolutely not meant to be for today. So, yeah, I have to wrap up my mind. The next picture is just to show you the analogies that this Alexander Leiter-Rosser made between the shapes that he was able to create with his frequencies on water and shapes that we can find in nature. Actually, all of that is very organic. Okay, I think I really need to close this guy to find back on track. Sorry for that. So what do we have? We have the liquid, we have the relation of let's call it the vibrational world and the liquid, which is creating form. And we have in the embryo very subtle, very thin membranes that are able to follow this shape. So if you imagine this drop of water that we saw changing into a shape, if we have the same wrapped in a very thin layer, in a very thin membrane, then the membrane also would slowly get into that shape, right? And with the time, if we densify the membrane, it would stay more or less in that form. And that's actually what we do in the physical body and what we also do for example, in pottery. You have clay, which has more water than the vessel you will have after it. And since it has more water, you're able to give it a form. And after you're finished, you're going to burn it. So you take water out, you will fix the form, yet you will have something that can break, what is not the possibility before. But that's actually what happens in every single living organism. And that's also why infants still have a bigger amount of water. And with age, we have the tendency to dry out and to break. It's exactly the same story. So, what else? Am I finished? I think so. I mean, we have, we have.
May you dive a little bit deeper into the story of, okay, this is an elbow, and well, because I have a joint here, I move around this joint, versus embryologic. You said, because there is this movement in the embryo, I developed a joint
Exactly.
here. May you dive just a little bit deeper in that for me?
So, yeah. So you have a vibration.
Mm.
So you have something very subtle or coming from a very subtle realm. But you might not see anything until you put some water there. So you have your little shell, let's say, like Alexander Leiterwasser does, and you have a vibration. You don't see anything. But now that you put water in, ooh, you see the form created by the vibration. Right? So the vibration was here before. And in the embryo, motion was here before. The fields that are creating the form are pulsating. They have this connection that is going back and forth. Let's say this connection between the here and beyond. Right? So the beyond is already active. But in the here, you don't see anything. Now you put some water in the here, and you see the reaction of the beyond in the here. And this starts to create structure.
So a joint would be sort of a manifestation of one of those points where the wave, on your little scale, you have like on the bottom, you have like three little.
No, that was just to show what Chladni is doing with different vibration. Yes, of course, we have all these starting with this how did I call it, this force. It falls apart into more and more different and more complex rhythms that will interact and interfere. But the way it's created, it's really that you have this vibration here, and then you have this drop of water with a membrane that starts to separate into different cells more and more. And as long as this is going on, it will shape the embryo. So this motion here is here before we infuse matter. So we have the motion, but we can't see it. And then via the embryo, matter is infused at the place where this motion already happened coming from the field. So the embryo has no other chance than to be built in this shape. If you, for example, look at trees which are on underground water, when you have underground water, you have, of course, a torsion, and this will have energetically and also physically, substantially, an effect on the plants and everything that lives there and grows there. So if you look at these kind of trees, they are spiraled because the spiraling motion is here before the tree grows. And the tree grows there, having liquid in it, and the liquids always have this tendency, and so the tree will be shaped in a spiral. But motion was there before.
So the motion I feel of the lemniscate in the elbow is the representative of the embryological movement, rather the representative of the embryological movement which was before and was creating the joint. That's what you're telling me. If I touch an elbow and I feel the lemniscate, I actually feel the movement which was before the joint.
Yeah, we don't know. Actually, you tell me something, I just believe you. Maybe you yeah, that's what happened. We so often in osteopathy we are talking about something. It seems that we're talking about the same thing and we do not, but we're not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And at some point we will disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because since half an hour we were not talking about the same thing, but we were very close to each other. So maybe I feel the structure, which does this, but you feel this right away.
Mm.
But you think you're on the structure. And I believe you. But there is, you see, there is a nuance in it, right? If I hold an aquarium and in the aquarium I have some wave going on, it's a different, I will feel the wave if I hold only the aquarium, right? I will feel it anyway. But I will feel it slightly differently and I will be able to work differently with it if I put my hands directly into the water. So both are interesting in our work. To be on the aquarium and play with the water, that's what we do, for example, in the V-spread. But you can also be directly, and you just have to know exactly what you do. You can also play with the aquarium, and automatically the water will get into it. The water in it will react. So you can do your GOT like this, but you can also do a GOT like this. And it's not the same thing. And maybe with this wave, I will be able to work on a fascia here that is like this. And with the liquid, with the liquid, I work the fascia. So I say I'm working with the liquid, yet I work the more dense structure. I work the structural part. And I can work the structural parts directly like this. Or I can play with both. So putting this into its ease or into the full rigidity and then adding some liquids somewhere to blow it up.
What about the movement of the blood in the capillaries? It's again due to the already present motion.
Sorry, say it again?
You said the heart is not
Yeah.
necessarily responsible for the flow of the blood.
Yeah.
So that means this already existing vibration is carrying the blood, moving the blood.
Partially. Of course, the heart has a very important and central role in the blood flow. But it seems there are so many incredibly interesting researchers, actually. It seems to be way more important, first of all, on the electromagnetic level and in the informational level, transport of information, also via the pulse. But the pulse is in the artery, it's not necessarily in the blood. The pulse is the wall of the artery that does, like if I would have a whip on the floor or a long rope and I do this. That's what happens in the wall of the artery. And it's representative for the beat of the blood, but not necessarily for the flow of the blood. So yes, of course, it has an important role because it keeps a high pressure. But actually, we cannot make a lot of experiments by just shutting down the heart to see what happens. But for sure, the flow in the arterial and venous system is very much also dependent on other mechanisms because the heartbeat it seems to explain a lot, but it does not. On the other hand, it has a lot of other roles.
So water is like acting like a medium for the yin-yang pulsation of the universe. It can pick up on it and can sort of like
To me,
flip it into actual something that's
exactly. To me, water is really the interface between the here and beyond. Here.
Mhm.
And that's why when we look for life, the first thing we look for on other planets or wherever is water. We could not imagine life without water. And it's actually also including all the anomalies. I think it's something about 70 or 80, not 80, 70 something anomalies that water has. So things that it should not do, but it does it anyway. But it's against everything that we know about physics and chemistry.
How you use this concept
Okay, so we're done for today. Thank you very much. Yeah, you mean in osteopathy? First of all, open your mind. That helps a lot. I don't know. Yeah, I know, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what I could tell you and how to teach you that, but the fact that you think beyond the limitation that you put it yourself on already opens doors. So the fact that you're aware of that. He asked me or we were talking about, do we feel the landscape, or do we feel the subtle force, or do we feel the structure being driven by the subtle force? Actually, if you have no awareness for that, you will never know, and you will always stay at the same place. But the moment you have some awareness, when you feel it, you're going to ask yourself, and you're not going to get answers right away. But once in a while, you're going to re-ask yourself. And then suddenly you will realize, okay, but it's funny, there is one more subtle way to feel it, and there is the other way. And then suddenly it becomes like more clear. And then you're able to define. And then you're able, after a while, to say, okay, I'm on a structure, but I feel this force, or I'm on a force. But this happened because at a certain point, you started to open your mind for this possibility. So just having this in mind will open doors. Second is that there is not really any separation in the world. So once you got this, you get incredible forces working with you. When you work on a very single spot, or suddenly you have the idea to ask the fascial body to help you to work on that spot, you can be still as precise, but you have the whole body working on it. And this is going to give you completely different results. And you can play around with it. You can also play with realms that are beyond the patient, if you have somehow access to it, or a concept or whatever, knowing that this little knot of flesh is just the expression of something that is way bigger anyway. So if you start to take all these forces into account, you really have an incredible force working on that. And here again, we are in that fractal concept. If I see only this picture, I don't have the same results than if I'm able to zoom in and out and say, okay, whoa. I work on all the pictures to change this one. Or I work on this one to change the whole picture. So actually, I won't give you a technique. But yeah, being open to that. And it's funny because I made a thesis on the CV4. That's also why I'm telling that we often talk about the same thing, and it's not absolutely not the same. I made a thesis on the CV4, and I was lucky enough to have significant results. 0.01, so 99%. That's quite good. But I had the exact opposite results than any osteopath are telling since 100 years. So I made something that I thought is a CV4, and I did prevent my patient from becoming parasympathetic. So in the control group, they lie down. Because they lie down for 15 minutes, they get more and more parasympathetic. And the patient that I do a CV4 on is not able to do that. He stays in the same stress level than he was before. Yet we had positive results. But the measurements showed that I prevented that. So why is it? And I went through different theories and ideas that I had, and finally, because I just go with the flow and do this and that, and I'm absolutely not structured. So for this purpose of a thesis, I tried to be very structured. So I was on my seat before, I was exactly there. I made exactly what was written in Magoon, step by step, and I completely lost the patient because I was only on the fourth ventricle. And I redid off thesis. It wasn't, unfortunately, not enough to do real good statistics. It was only 5 or 6 people. But it was amazing, the difference. When I just went into, like I would do it in my office, I was just there with this wobbling entity of a patient. And then I brought this entity slowly down to the point where there is no flexion extension anymore. And there you had parasympathetic, I don't remember, but getting 20, 30 times higher than before. So that was, and it was only attention. My hands did exactly the same. In both cases, that's what I was saying, I did exactly what was written in Magoon, yet with a different inner attitude of empathy and a different notion for the globality. So that makes a big difference. Do I answer your questions? Because it's like an impulse and then I catch it and go somewhere and then I'm like, oh, what was the question? Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure, but I cannot really make up my mind what I said, what I forgot. But I think it wrapped it together into one big picture, more or less. So it's just pieces of the puzzle that I stumbled upon over time, somehow in a brainstorm put together, and it seemed to be able to give a picture at one point, but yeah, a few more generations.
So this hypothesis is different than what Still and all the other guys were writing about?
No, it's not different. I don't think that it's in opposition to that,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure I'm using the terms in the same way. I don't think, it's like, you know, when you take real wise people, you can take a Christian and a Muslim and a Hindu and they sit together and they have big fun. They talk about exactly the same thing.
Mm.
Yet they have very different words for it and concepts. And when we are beginner in the religion, we think, I'm a Christian, so the Buddhists must not have, they must be wrong. No, as long as you see a paradox, you're not there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that I say something that is different. I just say it in wordings that maybe I could use a word like a biodynamic force or whatever in a different way, and this could mix somebody up when you go then to the literature, just because I'm not sure about it. But I think it's very much in there. Thank you. Yeah. What was fascinating also about these motions that you were asking is that these things were described by osteopaths. They were described also by persons like Rudolf Steiner, which built the anthroposophy, which was a guy which saw very, very clearly the phenomena behind the structure, behind the appearance. In certain times in his life, he even had some troubles to really see the apparent things that was apparent for others, because these other phenomena beyond were so strong for his perception. So he talked about it. The osteopath told a lot of things, and they explained the whole PRM like we know it today. But they did this long time before we had the embryology. So in the time of Still, Sutherland, and so on, we had very poor embryology, only on chickens, and yet it appeared to be very, very different in humans. So this concept of phylogenetics was a fake. It has been proven already in that time to be a fake. They described it, and then we have in the 40s to the 70s maybe Eric Blechschmidt, who comes and describes your embryology exactly in this way in German books. And the Germans in that time are nowhere in terms of osteopathy. The osteopathy is mainly in the French and English-speaking parts of the world. So we have to wait until the 90s, until the link, until Blechschmidt is translated, and until the Germans get stronger and stronger in osteopathy, until we bring them together. Yet now that we bring them together, we realize it matches extremely well. So Blechschmidt tells exactly the same about the motion in the embryo than all the osteopaths did. So it's actually a very amazing fact that to me, to my feeling, is like a proof, or at least reinforces my belief. Okay, yeah.
And
Last one.
Yeah, and basically, you say, okay, the moment you move your attention to be open for another level or another experience within the body, you can do the same technique, but with a different mental approach, or with a different being yourself.
Yeah.
And that changes, as has been proven by your thesis. So, if you're into like there, or if you're really in another mood, this will change every technique. And so it's kind of, we know the techniques, we're good with the techniques, just let's play around with a different approach and see what happens in the
It's
body.
actually something that you can experiment with very easily. You will feel. And this again is very similar to what we know from daily life. If I'm a psychotherapist and I would like to know what happened in your youth and where the traumas are, you're not going to give me an answer, right? Neither you're going to give me an answer if come tell me. Right? So I need to be present, but not invasive. So that's, for example, something you can play with. Sometimes you see students in the very beginning where you have to listen to a skull, right? They are, and the skull is, and they tell you, I don't feel anything. I don't know why. Right? So it's very easy to play around with this kind of things. But for me, the key is really my inner being, my attitude, and my intention, and not the technique. Not the technique. So thank you very much for this evening. I had great fun. I really appreciate that you're passionate enough to listen to me so late. And looking forward to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Sie kriegt es nicht mehr hin.
Ich habe mich so erschrocken.